Hey, It12s. Um, Sorry this video's come a bit late. Obviously, I've been knocked around a bit, but hopefully we'll be back on my feet and looking forward to being back in the classroom. Today, all I want to look at. Hey, Lacey. Today, all I want to look at is the same entries looking at depreciation, but now we're looking at the reducing balance method, which can be a little bit more complex to calculate, but the entries are the same, and I think you'll be just fine. So let's jump straight in. So the reason we look at two different types of depreciation in VCE accounting is because what we're looking to do is we're looking to see if there's a better way to depreciate assets that we use more of in earlier in their lifespan and they're able to generate more revenue. So as they get older and they're less efficient at generating revenue, we have a new method. And that's why we came up with the reducing balance method, because it's more effective in terms of generating revenue in earlier years rather than later years. So, office furniture, things like that, they're going to be consistent in the way that they earn revenue. But if you think about things like vehicles or different technologies and stuff, as they get older, we're going to use them less. We may put them as a backup asset, things like that. So realistically, we're not using it very often to generate revenue. So we have the reducing balance method. Now, in terms of calculating it, we do the calculation not on a fixed amount, but on a fixed percentage of the carrying value. So that means as that carrying value gets smaller, the amount that we depreciate will get smaller as well. Now, this can be a complex calculation, and the good news is that it's going to be very infrequent that we'll actually ask you to calculate it. It's more so that you understand the calculation, that you'll be asked to practice it, but it's unlikely that it will be asked in an exam. So let's look at the following idea. Let's say that we purchase a vehicle for $40,000 plus GST, and we're going to depreciate it at 25% per annum on the reducing balance method. So if we were doing straight line, it's easy, it's $10,000 a year. But in this case, it's going to change. So in the first year, it's at $10,000. It's $40,000 times 0.25. And the double entry that's required, it's no different. Just looks like that. Okay? But in the second year, you can see a bit of a difference occurring. So let's look at that. So we still keep that 25% rate, but obviously we've got a different carrying value. We've now got a carrying value of $30,000, which means that instead of depreciating $10,000, we're depreciating $7,500. Okay? And you can actually use a table to show how this calculation continues over time. So you can see that we have our depreciation expense per year in year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. You can see our accumulated depreciation build up and the carrying value reducing. Now, it's important to keep in mind that with reducing balance method, because it often goes into the cents, we end up doing some rounding, and that's because realistically, it's not relevant to calculate it down to the cents. So the method that you choose to use, whether it's straight line or reducing balance, is going to come down to the consideration of how that asset earns revenue or assists in earning revenue. If it's going to be more productive in early years rather than later years, that's when reducing balance needs to be used. If it's going to be consistent, then the straight line pattern can be more appropriate. But with that said, the double entries will always stay the same. Depreciation is still an expense, and we're still going to be closing it off to P&L summary. Accumulated depreciation is still a negative asset, and we still report it on the balance sheet. And the same issues in terms of relevance versus verifiability versus faithful representation still apply. We know that it's not a verifiable figure, it is all based on estimation, but it's relevant to the business to provide that in terms of determining profit. The key thing to remember is that with depreciation, it doesn't try to maintain the current market value of an asset. It's trying to match the cost of an asset against the revenue that it earns. So as it's being used up, sort of thing. You've got to remember this because there's going to be times where assets increase in value. I could have a 3-year-old computer and the technology in that might appreciate in value because there's a shortage in supply. But that doesn't mean that I suddenly stop depreciating it. I'm still allocating the cost of the asset against the revenue that it earns. So let's head to the wrap up and I'll leave you guys with the questions that you have to do. Reducing balance can seem like a scary and intimidating sort of thing because you have to do all this extra calculation, and there'll be times where you're showing these very complex calculations of how to calculate the percentage and things like that. But that's not the sort of thing that you'll be asked for in an exam, which means that the entries are still going to be the exact same ones you've already learned and you've already mastered. You'll still be doing the same reports, the same general journal entries, the same closing entries, so there's not going to be any major difference for you. This just allows us to have a more relevant view of profit and to look at a wider range of different assets. Okay? So I'll leave you guys with the questions that you need to get done, and I can't wait to see you guys back in class. Sorry for the voice and scratchiness and everything, but I'll catch up with you soon. Bye.